sanji judan soji chonam lai chanchu pardo dane chamsu chi dagi jinsu jiber sunam jin ro lai penchira sanji robar shu sanji judan soji chonam lai chanchu parado dane japsu che dage jinsu jibe sunam che rolai penchira sanje roba shu sanje chodan soje chonam la chanchu parado dane japsu che dage jinsu jibe sunam che sanjin rubar shu sanji chudan suji chonam la chanchu pardo dane jamsu che dagi jinsu jibe sunam chi penchira sanjin rubar shu simje tamje dehwa dande Job dan den bar chuji dong ra dan dong ra me be de wa tam ba ta war chuji ye ren cha da dan che ve dan yom chen bo la ne bar chu che sem che tam che de wa dan de ve dong ra dan dong ra je jo dan ra wa chu ji dong ra me be de wa tam ba dan men ra wa chu ji ye ren cha dan dan che ve dan yom chen bo la ne ba chu chi sim che tam che de wa dan de ve jo dan den ba chu chi dan dong re ji jo dan cha wa chu chi dong re me be de wa tam ba dan men ra wa chu chi ye ren cha dan dan che ve dan yom chen bo la ne ba chu chi Chom den den jambe yang lai chang cai lo kang ge lo zhu zhim nye zhen zhe nye dar nam da ram sar ve chi nye dun gun chi jen si ji ni jie do gar le bam zi si be zhe ra ma ri mun tu mo dong re chi si re ve zhou cu gyun la bu jie dar zi yin la zhu ju yang den su Ru dar che ro nyu mo ni long le che cha ro ro zi jin ma ri mu sir dong ra nyu gu chi ni jun zi ra zhen ne ne ta jin sa ju tar sun yun den le zo gyar se tu yu gu ju cha ju dan ju ni jian zhe da lu mu sir jian be yang lai du zi din chu ji chen ra bu sir ji da lu de mu men ba ram sir ga dan din ju xiong lu do ba ye lu zhi bo bian han wa za tu sir. La perfection de sagesse, ineffable, inconcevable, inexprimable, de la nature de l'espace en
Ineffable, inconceivable, inexpressible perfection of wisdom, not produced and not ceased, space and essence, domain of individual reflective awareness. Homage to the mother of victors from all three times. Homage to the glorious perfection of wisdom. Thus have I heard once the glorious one was residing at Vulture's Peak in Rajagriha together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the glorious one abided evenly in the samadhi of the aspects of phenomena called the appearance of the profound. Also, at the same time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, beholding the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, observed that even the five aggregates are empty of substance, Then, by the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. How should a son of the lineage or a daughter of the lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? Addressed in this way, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said this to the venerable son of Sharadvati. Shariputra, the son of the lineage or the daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom, should observe in this way. They should view correctly that even the five aggregates are empty of substance. Matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, emptiness is not other than matter, matter is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling and perception, conditioning, and consciousness are empty. Thus, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, not produced, not ceased, stainless, not free of stain, undiminished, unfilled. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no matter, no feeling, no apperception, no conditioning, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no phenomenon, no eye constituent, until no mental constituent, up to and including no mental consciousness constituent, no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, until no aging and death, up to and including no extinction of aging and death. There is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds having no obscuration, they have no fear, and passing entirely beyond falsity, they completely pass beyond sorrow. All the Buddhas who abide in the three times by relying too on the perfection of wisdom have fully awakened into the unsurpassable, true and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom is the mantra of great insight, the mantra of the unsurpassable, the mantra peering with the peerless, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering. Because it does not deceive, it should be known to be true. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is stated. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisoha. Shariputra, in that way, Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the glorious one arose from that samadhi and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Well done, son of the lineage, it is like that. Son of the lineage, it is like that. Just as you have taught it, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced. Even the Tathagatas admire it. After the glorious one had thus spoken, the venerable son of Sharadvati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, and all of those surrounding and the entire world, with its gods, humans, demigods, and Gandharvas in admiration, praised the words of the glorious one. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisoha. So now we are in this part of the text. Therefore, Shariputra, there is in emptiness, there is no matter, no feeling, etc., all the way up until this last sentence, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. We saw the categories designated here. We can see that the text says in emptiness. Nila. In emptiness. So here, all of these parts, as well as the preceding sections, are connected, following the path of the vision, the path of seeing, through the path of familiarization, training, how we classify these parts in terms of the realization of the five paths. So here, all of the consequences arrive from understanding emptiness and designate the exercise of familiarization with emptiness, perfecting wisdom, the perfection of wisdom. A bodhisattva here enters into meditation, meditative absorption on emptiness regularly, again and again. And what they contemplate is emptiness, the absence of being in and of itself, of phenomena. At this moment, there is no grasping phenomena in a conventional way. And then in this sense, in emptiness, there is no grasping of matter. Here, this does not concern the denial of matter or feeling, etc. In other words, of finding an absence of them or of finding nothingness. It's rather that their being in and of themselves cannot be found and is not found. So there's no longer a perception of grasping these phenomena that includes grasping these phenomena as having a being in and of themselves. So in this way, conventional appearances that include grasping, that conventionally we attribute being in and of themselves to these phenomena, this is not perceived. There isn't form, matter, feeling, the perception, etc., as it's mentioned here. So seeing, what is implicit here is that seeing emptiness, what we can understand by this, that it concerns not seeing form or any phenomena, not seeing phenomena. There is no grasping of these phenomena. When we say in emptiness, there is no matter, this doesn't mean that there isn't matter at all. It means that there is no matter that exists inherently, substantially. Because in meditative absorption on emptiness, if matter had some existence in and of itself, it would appear, because that would be its true nature. But our final analysis of matter is that it has no being in and of itself. So here, we're not saying that matter doesn't exist in the sense of suggesting that it has a non-existence. It simply doesn't have a being in and of itself. There's a subtlety that's very important here. When, in short, we contemplate emptiness, then we no longer grasp form. We no longer mistake form. We no longer have this false attribution of being in and of itself that we grasp, that we normally attribute. Forms, matter, visual forms, etc., all of these things have characteristics, and these characteristics can be dissected without us being able to find the character of a being in of itself that is present independently on its own. Whereas emptiness is not something that we can grasp, designate. It is free of all characteristics in this way. So in this sense, emptiness is also not quite, we can see here, earlier in the previous part of the text, we saw that there was a kind of identification. We say that matter is emptiness, emptiness is matter, as if it were not two separate things, whereas here we can see that this is not the same thing either. That's what I said earlier. It is neither identical nor distinct. Matter has this characteristic, as we saw, of being able to be dissected, that emptiness does not have. Also, feelings have a characteristic of experience. Experience is not emptiness either. Mental representations or apperceptions have a characteristic of identification, apprehending, and identifying, whereas there's nothing to identify in emptiness. So this is not the same thing. So we can look at all the characteristics of all of the aggregates, each of these elements that we looked at. Conditioning or conditioning phenomena have the characteristic of being composite and conditioned, of being constructed, whereas emptiness, there's nothing constructed. Consciousnesses have the characteristic of grasping the particularity, specificities, whereas emptiness is the inobservable. So emptiness is not consciousness. It is not the five aggregates because the five aggregates are painted or constructed, whereas emptiness is not. Aggregates are not emptiness, we can see. Here we can see that this concerns different ways of looking, observing. We can see that emptiness is not something in and of itself, but understanding emptiness is not the same thing as grasping illusion. Grasping illusion, reifying, remaining in confusion, being in confusion, being under the influence of ignorance is grasping I, grasping duality, attributing all of these characteristics, whereas ultimately they do not have them. Seeing emptiness is not grasping all these characteristics. That is why, in this sense, in the emptiness, there is no matter, feeling, etc. Then, in the same way, after we saw that we saw matter, feeling, a perception, conditioning, consciousness, then I has the characteristic of vision. There is no characteristic of emptiness. Ear, of course, has hearing, nose, smell. The tongue has a characteristic of experiencing tastes, flavors. The body has the characteristic of experience, tactile experience, whereas emptiness includes none of these characteristics. Mental has the characteristic of distinguishing specificities, whereas emptiness is free of characteristics. It is not the same as the mental aspect. The six senses have the characteristic of grasping. Due to the fact that emptiness is without characteristic, it is not the six senses. It is not physical forms. Physical forms are characterized by color, shape, but emptiness is without characteristics. Thus, it is not this. Sounds have the characteristic of being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The same for smells, tastes, tactile objects. Phenomena have particular characteristics. All the things that we habitually grasp, we grasp their characteristics. We grasp specific things about them that we distinguish from other things and we attribute to them, and that we attribute with a being in and of itself, something independent. But there is nothing independent that is established in and of itself that is permanent or substantial in the sense of being established in and of itself. They are all arising based on dependent arising. There is no characteristic that we can truly grasp. We cannot find the being in and of itself of any of these categories. Objects are also not emptiness. The 18 elements likewise have characteristics of limiting us, whereas emptiness is free of these characteristics. It is also not the 12 links of dependent arising, of samsara, nor the 12-fold extinction of samsara, because each of these have characteristics. It is not suffering, origin, cessation, or path, because suffering has the characteristic of dissatisfaction, and the afflictions, origin, has the characteristic of grasping, appropriation. It is also not the beyond suffering, because this has the characteristic of peace. It is not the path, because this concerns something that is characterized by knowledge. In this sense, emptiness is not the Four Noble Truths. It is also not wisdom. Because wisdom has the characteristic of directly perceiving phenomena as they are, but emptiness is without characteristics, so it is also not wisdom. It is not attainment. Attainment means attaining insurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment, which is characterized. It is also not non-attainment. Non-attainment means the absence of attainment of enlightenment for sentient beings, ordinary sentient beings. In other words, in emptiness, we do not find the character of perfect and complete enlightenment, nor the absence of complete and perfect enlightenment as for ordinary beings. In other words, there is neither attainment nor non-attainment. So all of these lists demonstrate the emptiness of any substantial phenomenon that could exist in and of itself. We look at all phenomena of samsara all the way up through perfect enlightenment. This presents emptiness. As such, emptiness is beyond all definition, all expression. So next we can look at other commentaries. It is taught that the 5 aggregates are empty of substance. This is what we saw earlier. Therefore, the 5 aggregates that are grasped by confusion as such as having the characteristics of the 5 aggregates are in reality empty. It is not appropriate to designate them as matter and other because they are indivisible or inseparable from emptiness. In order to dissipate the grasping of these characteristics, that is, a mistaken conception concerning the names, which is designating, confusing name and representation with reality, it is said that when there is emptiness, in other words, when we perceive emptiness, there is no matter, no feeling, etc. The 5 aggregates are empty of being in and of themselves. This means that they are indivisible or inseparable from emptiness beyond their names and designations. Signifiers, names, are superposed on things that do not have these characteristics in and of themselves. They are simply designations, grasping, that do not correspond with the reality of phenomena that are free of all being in and of themselves. And in this sense, there is no matter, no feeling. This is why the text says, no matter, no feeling. Furthermore, in the emptiness, we cannot grasp. In emptiness, there is, when we look at the emptiness of these phenomena, there is nothing we can grasp and name as matter or feeling. In other words, if matter, as well as the 4 other aggregates, are emptiness, it is inappropriate to designate them with names that that implicitly affirm their being in and of themselves, and that distinguishes them from another in an ultimate way. When we designate, yes, this is matter and it's different from feeling, and just the fact of designating it, grasping it, creates this distinction. It is inappropriate to designate them in this way because when we look for their being in and of themselves, we do not find it. Emptiness is beyond all expression. And just as emptiness is beyond all expression, also the reality of aggregates is beyond all expression. Designations and conceptions by which we differentiate the aggregates do not have any being in and of themselves. They do not have any true existence. Here we can understand that, for example, matter, feeling, all of these designations are simply designations. They do not correspond with anything in reality and cannot express emptiness. What we grasp, matter, grasp, feeling, we're grasping an imagination in a way. It does not describe reality. So next, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. These are the six senses, the six sense faculties, and these depend on the five aggregates. If the five aggregates do not have any true existence, then how can the six senses have their own existence? Because they are not something other than the five aggregates. The six sense faculties are not something other than the five aggregates. They cannot be found independently from the five aggregates. There is no visible object, sound, odor, taste, tactile object phenomena. These objects are the fruit of our predispositions that manifest due to our ignorance. The mind, in confusion, grasps these things as being truly existing and substantially as it perceives them, because ultimately they are empty of being in and of themselves. They do not exist in and of themselves. There is no I constituent until no mental constituent, up to and including no mental consciousness constituent. This refers to the 18 elements or dhatus. If the sense faculties have no existence, that are the basis for the six consciousnesses, then they also have no true existence. These six objects, six outer objects, don't exist as objects in and of themselves. They are simply appearances that depend on the sources of the faculties and consciousness. They depend, and then the consciousness exists based on the objects and the faculties. So the 18 elements have no being in and of themselves. the 6 objects, when something appears to our experience, to our perception, immediately we think that because it appears, that's the only justification we have, that it is exactly as it appears. And we grasp it in this way. That's the way that we stray. It's our natural confusion. When we look closer, you can see that it is something constructed. It is not established by itself or in and of itself. As such, we can see that all phenomena are co-produced. All the points, the categories that we have seen, are all mutually dependent, because all phenomena are dependent on each other in some way or another, in various different manners. We cannot find anything that exists objectively, autonomously, on its own, in an inherent and substantial way. If you remember, in the Mula Madhyamaka Karikas, the excellent stanzas of the middle way, in the 24th chapter, it is said, because there is no phenomenon that is not co-produced based on dependent arising, there is no phenomenon that is not emptiness. Because everything manifests from dependent arising, that is the proof that everything is emptiness. Because all phenomena are dependent arising, that is the proof of emptiness. Perhaps you have questions? Hello, Rinpoche. I wanted to know if Yidam practice can facilitate understanding emptiness by preventing reifying ego. Yidam practices, if we carry them out correctly and receive the appropriate instructions, then that is a way of uniting the practices of shamatha and vipassana. It's an extremely powerful method. Particularly, Yidam practice has this method that we call hirim, sampana karma in Sanskrit, I believe, and that uses our imagination. We can very easily, with our mental, we can create very clear, distinct images, and even perceive them as if it were something perceived with our senses. In contrast with, well, the idea is that, in fact, everything is imagination. All perception is imagination. So we can understand how, through this, how we can transform our perception, how we're limited by our ordinary perception. Of course, it's a subject that's a little bit outside the framework of our teaching. It's something to be studied more precisely. But if it's practiced correctly, they are extremely powerful methods. In short, this is always the middle way. Here, there is neither conventional grasping of the world nor ultimate negation. There is not any absence that is confirmed in the ultimate sense. Rinpoche, for years, whether this is the 9th chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara or Nagarjuna stanzas, the text of Chandra Rakshita or the Heart Sutra, you try to help us access this experience of emptiness. Our experience is limited. So, how can I say it? Some of us, we're getting older, our hair is white. We get older, and the time of death is coming closer, uncertain. Do you think that one day you could directly introduce us to the nature of mind, because this concerns emptiness itself? Well, it's something that we're already doing in a way. In a direct way? The question asker. Rinpoche says, we give you indications. I think the important thing is to meditate, to practice. What you have studied, reflect on it. Reflect on its meaning. We have given you a lot of indications already. I think what's appropriate next is to study more in the context of meditative practice. Then it's possible to go a bit deeper. My question concerns time. Is it imagined to think that it exists or doesn't exist in relation to us? Because in relation to our human condition, we're always attributing an amount of time to something. And then when I hear kalpas and kalpas, it's scary. I would rather be spared from such a long time. And so I feel like this absolutely conditions, for example, we have white hair, death is coming quickly. Is there patience in this? Is, in fact, in emptiness, we don't talk about time. Is it beyond this? When I observe the time, the sky that has no depth, no edge, when I jump into that, there's like a break from this. There's something inseparable from space that occurs. Ultimately, time is like space. It's ungraspable. And the manifestation of time is connected with our confusion and our ignorance. In emptiness, there is no time. Concerning the amount of time necessary to attain enlightenment, that depends on how we apply ourselves. In other words, we're talking about the fact that time exists for those who are in confusion. Beyond confusion, we are also beyond time. We are something intemporal that is beyond time. But given that we have habitual tendencies, veils, etc., that hinder us from applying ourselves to meditative practice, the amount of time is given in this way, that it requires a long time to eliminate all of these tendencies. This is to also show the greatness of the path to be accomplished. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to take so long. Enlightenment can be, if we have the right instructions, and particularly on a personal level, if we are diligent in practice, then we can attain enlightenment. It's possible in this lifetime. This possibility was demonstrated by a great number of great masters of the past, notably, of course, Milarepa, who attained enlightenment during his same lifetime. But he didn't stop meditating. He put everything aside to practice entirely. So we have to try as much as we can to truly apply ourselves to practice. If we manage to truly apply ourselves to practice, it's not something that we do and it's just a specific hour. Ultimately, it's something that we need to do 24/7, 365 days a year. But we have to do this progressively. It's necessary to appreciate the quality of practice. We can't force it if we don't understand. We really need to understand. We have to practice what we know how to do, and from there we progress. And don't get discouraged thinking, I'm not getting enlightened yet. I wish I had been enlightened yesterday. Don't get discouraged. Don't lose courage. But apply what you can. In our intention, in our will, we need to try to always stay with this priority, not deviate from this priority, deepen our understanding, our knowledge, our meditation. What is most important for us is to develop relative bodhicitta, to generate love and compassion. That will carry us toward emptiness. Very important. 3 infinite kalpas is a way of speaking about the degree of accumulation of merit and wisdom that we need. But through very efficient means that we have in our lineage, it is possible in a single lifetime to perfect the 3 infinite kalpas of accumulation of merit and wisdom. But I think already if we can manage to access in our lifetime, for example, the path of accumulation or preparation, then this is already huge. Even if we stay where we are and we don't regress from the path of accumulation, that's already great. The thing to remember is if we take bodhisattva vows and we cultivate bodhicitta, then we are in the noble lineages of the Buddhas in a certain way. And if we don't go against our bodhisattva vows, then we are certain to attain enlightenment one day, regardless of the time. That's something extraordinary. You could have just continued in samsara with ever having any idea of how or when it would end. It won't end on its own. On the other hand, you've grabbed onto the end of the rope that will help you begin to progress and liberate yourselves from samsara. As beginners, it's important to concentrate on bodhicitta, your ethical discipline, on expressing wishes, bodhisattva aspirations, really cultivating this is very important. Of course, death can happen at any moment, but if we make practice our priority, I'll start where I am and practice from here where I am. In the worst of cases, then at least I can find similar conditions. And if life is long, then and I have positive conditions, then perhaps I can even progress more. But we must not only be attached to the result, it's necessary to also be attached to progressing, practice. So there you go. Here's a question from online. If matter does not exist outside of the consciousness that perceives it, how can we explain that the earth was formed 4 billion years ago and that something existed before human life on earth? When we say that matter does not exist, it also means that consciousness does not exist. We have to reread what we said. It means that it doesn't exist substantially. This doesn't exclude the fact that conventionally we may have this idea or we can observe elements arising from causality that depend on other sentient beings, the environment around us, the earth, its history. But that's on a conventional level. When we think about the earth and its history, it's always something that consciousness is thinking. It's always conventional in this sense. Ultimately, concerning emptiness, being in and of itself, of the earth, of the universe, of a person, of consciousness, all of this, we can't find it. It's important not to confuse this with an idealistic view that's solipsistic, that thinks that it's only my consciousness, everything is my consciousness. That's another form of reification. Outer phenomena have their causality, but they're dependent arising. We're talking about our experience, the 12 links of dependent arising of samsara. Samsara exists not as a place that's somewhere, it exists as an illusion of my own mind. Samsara, hell, the planet Earth itself. In terms of my experience, it might appear as being a place, but in fact, objectively, we cannot find this place outside of our own experience. It's real to me because I experience it. Outer phenomena, the world, other sentient beings, they're all dependent arising. They emerge based on dependent arising. They're all emptiness in reality. But saying the idea, the concept that there's something external that exists independently from my consciousness, this independence supposes being in and of itself. This is grasping being in and of itself. But if we look for this being in and of itself of the thing, we can't find it. Hello, Rinpoche. Concerning mind, it's just an observation. Perhaps it's a mistake, but that each of us has our own mind. And so mind seems, according to this view, there is a notion of a person. I feel like a prisoner of my reflection concerning this observation. And I imagine that emptiness must be applicable to this situation, but I can't seem to understand, to grasp how this can work. Can you shed some light on this point? Conventionally, on a relative level, in terms of illusion and confusion, yes. There is an outer world, there are people, all of this functions as it is, but in emptiness, it's not observable. If we look for the being in and of themselves of these phenomena, we won't find them. We also won't find the non-existence of the universe, of people, of individuals either. It's just that the reality of all these phenomena is not established as being in and of itself. Hello, Rinpoche. So in daily life, this connects with Christian's question, can we act knowing that things appear but don't have any intrinsic reality, and continue our lives with this view and accumulate merit if we can, and carry out positive actions, avoiding negative actions? Can that be a path? Of course. It's not as though this discernment would handicap. In fact, it's our ignorance that handicaps us. We're so habituated to ignorance that we think that a little bit of discernment will handicap us. If I don't grasp myself, if I don't grasp others, I won't be able to do anything. I won't be able to say anything because I'm so in ignorance. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. The more discernment I have, this will enormously change the way that I act, the way that I interact with others. My afflictions, hate, desire, attachment, jealousy, this won't have power over me. I'll be able to be in equanimity, in kindness, compassion, in a much greater way. Wisdom is not something that will handicap you, quite the opposite. Perfection of wisdom is what will lead you to having much greater discernment, much greater clarity of mind, much greater calm and liberty concerning the afflictions. It's not as though the perfection of wisdom will suddenly destroy or interrupt your mind, as if it were an interruption of your ability for understanding or having ideas or thoughts. Not at all. Sure, that's how I see it, but this is my personal experience, but trying to see everything as illusory, existing and non-existent, existing in an illusory way, in confrontations and our emotions, outside and inside. Rinpoche says, as a beginner, we can say, it's illusion, there's no self, etc. We can tell ourselves this, but it's still reification. Understanding emptiness is not reproducing a representation or a reification. Everything is illusion, everything is my mind, nothing is real. This isn't having discernment. This is a different type of reification that can have other consequences. Like if there's no self, then I have to say sentences without subject and object. Can I still use verbs? That's not how I meant my question, actually. Okay, I'm listening. The meaning of my question is not intense in terms of limiting ourselves. Can we be much freer in terms of the fact that there's no intrinsic reality. When we see conflicts and everything, then within we can see that our emotions don't have reality, and then they exhaust themselves. Rinpoche says, what exhausts themselves? The questioner says, yes, the afflictions exhaust themselves, but can we live our lives having this awareness? Rinpoche says, it's not about just having this consciousness. What does it mean, perfecting wisdom? What is the perfection of wisdom? It's much more subtle to say that it's much more subtle than saying, I have this idea that everything is emptiness. Living with this idea isn't approaching the perfection of wisdom. It's something that we first have to know. We have to learn. We have to listen to the teachings. We really need to listen with a diligence. And then there's learned wisdom. We talked about the 3 forms of wisdom. Learned wisdom is the fruit of having listened to and read the teachings. Information that is correctly heard, remembered, and understood without error. Once we've done this, that in and of itself is not easy, but after that, we have to reflect on it until we reach a certain conclusion concerning these teachings. And then this is an authentic wisdom that we can rely on, but it's still not, it's still a reflection of wisdom, if I may, because we have to actualize it in our experience. And this is an effort that is inseparably linked from samadhi, mental calm. Today, I'm sitting, I can't look at my mind without there being another thought every 2 seconds, and that I'm following it, and I'm always in this grasping of me and myself and everything around, and I'm living in this grasping. So we have to see how we can be correctly involved with practice. So first, there's following what is taught, following Shila, adopt ethical discipline in our lives. That's the first point. That's approaching the teaching of love and compassion and nonviolence to begin, and giving ourselves the necessary conditions to develop mental calm. That's something that I can concretely put into practice. On this basis, then we need to make effort in study and reflection, as I explained. Start to exercise ourselves, train so that our mind acquires stability. If we don't have this stability, even for a short time, we can't transform our mind. Ordinarily, we might understand emptiness intellectually, but understanding it intellectually isn't actually realizing. The realization of emptiness is in no way something that limits. On the contrary, it's something that gives us the ability to come to the aid of other sentient beings to truly express love and compassion. Just look at the example of the historical Buddha and the great masters of the past that all realize emptiness. Look at their great abilities, their great activity. In no way did it limit them. Even a master like Milarepa, who was the most ascetic, the most in retreat from the world, he was in constant contact with the world in different ways, and he helped. almost 10 till. So I'll let you eat. Thank you for your attention. This afternoon, we'll get together a bit earlier at 2:30 so that we can conclude no later than 4 so that those who have a long journey ahead can head out. Not too late.
Di tamche zegba nye toni nyebe ranam pamche jega naje balap truba ye sibe tsole ro wa sho.